I'm Alex, 31 years old, and I run a startup that, against all odds, recently closed a $25 million Series B funding round. It's still surreal to say out loud, especially since I come from a family that always treated me like the backup option. You know, the kid who isn't the star athlete, the valedictorian, or the golden child. Yeah, that was me, and I was fine with that, mostly. I grew up with average grades, quiet hobbies, and a low-key personality that didn't exactly shine next to my cousin Landon, the walking embodiment of parental pride and family investment. If my life was a group photo, I'd be the blurry background character, while Landon's face would be in perfect focus, framed by metaphorical sparkles and jazz hands. Landon's parents, my Uncle Todd and Aunt Melissa, had money. Not billionaire, yacht club-level money, but rich enough to afford a different kind of childhood for him. Landon got piano lessons, fencing, private school, and skiing trips every winter. Meanwhile, I got the public school cafeteria's Friday fish sticks and secondhand cleats for soccer. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was more the way everyone else treated him, like his wins were somehow the family's wins, and the rest of us were just lucky to be adjacent. My mom, bless her heart, worked 2 jobs and never once complained, but I could see it in her eyes whenever the family would start fawning over Landon, like she was silently apologizing to me for not being able to keep up. And it wasn't just the big stuff. Landon never had to ask for rides. He had his own car by 16. When he graduated college, some overpriced East Coast school with ivy on the buildings, my uncle gave him a position at his firm right away, no questions asked. Entry-level and title only. I once overheard my aunt bragging about how he was reviewing contracts and sitting in on high-level meetings within his first month. I didn't even get a job interview after college. I ended up freelancing in tech, building websites, taking whatever gigs I could find while renting a studio apartment the size of a parking space. For a long time, I swallowed it all. I kept my head down, worked hard, and focused on what I could control. I got good, really good at what I did. I met some brilliant people along the way, and together, we built something amazing from scratch. We didn't seek media attention, and I certainly never brought it up at family gatherings. I didn't need the approval, and honestly, I didn't want the spotlight. But sometimes the world has other plans. Thanksgiving had always been tolerable. I wouldn't say enjoyable, but there was a routine to it. Every year, my mom and I would show up with store-bought pies. No one ever touched them, but she insisted, and we'd sit through Uncle Todd's long-winded speeches about work ethic and family values. He'd usually wrap it up by toasting Landon's latest promotion or some vague achievement that sounded more impressive than it probably was. Meanwhile, I got the occasional "So, are you still doing computer stuff?" from relatives who couldn't be bothered to remember my job title. But this Thanksgiving felt different before we even walked through the door. My mom was quieter than usual on the drive over. She kept adjusting her blouse in the mirror and muttering under her breath. I asked if everything was okay, and she gave me a tight smile and said, "Just brace yourself." I didn't press. I figured it was just the usual family stress. When we arrived, the house was already full. Todd's mansion had one of those massive open floor plans, with tall ceilings and hardwood floors that echoed every step. The kitchen smelled like butter and garlic, the kind of rich aroma that makes you hungry even when you're not. People were milling around with drinks, balancing appetizers on tiny plates. I recognized most of the faces, relatives I saw once or twice a year, but I noticed something strange. A few people kept glancing at me, whispering, not in a hostile way, but curious, intrigued, like they knew something they weren't supposed to. I caught up with a couple of cousins, made small talk, and tried to ignore it. But then Landon spotted me. He walked over with that trademark smirk of his, the one that made it seem like he was about to sell you a timeshare you didn't want. Well, if it isn't my favorite second-string cousin," he said, clapping me on the back a little too hard. "Still working from home? Or did you finally join the real world?" "Still working," I replied with a polite smile. "Things have been busy." "Right," he said with a wink. "Tech stuff. Apps or crypto or whatever the kids are doing now." I shrugged. "Something like that." Before I could move on, Uncle Todd sauntered over with a whiskey in hand. "Alex," he boomed. "Glad you could make it. Your mother said you've been doing all right." He said it the way someone might say, "I heard your goldfish is still alive." I nodded. "Yeah, it's been a good year." Todd chuckled. "Good to hear. You know, if you're ever looking for something more stable, Landon could always use an assistant over at the firm. Could be a great learning opportunity. I blinked. Thanks, but I think I'm okay. Oh, come on, Landon added, sipping his drink. We could get you a desk next to mine. You'd finally get to see what a real office looks like. My jaw clenched, but I kept my tone even. Appreciate it, but I'm not really looking for that kind of role. It was classic Landon. Offer a fake olive branch just to make himself look generous. I was used to it. What I wasn't used to was my mom stepping forward and placing a gentle hand on my arm. Actually, she said softly, Alex has had a big year. He's being modest. Todd raised an eyebrow. Oh, my mom hesitated for a split second, then said, his startup just raised $25 million. The air shifted. I felt it instantly, like someone had opened a window and let a cold draft sweep through the room. Conversations dipped around us. A few people turned their heads. Landon blinked slowly, the smirk on his face faltering just a hair. Todd looked stunned, then forced a laugh. 25 million, he repeated. Like Monopoly money? Or real dollars? Real, I said quietly. From a few VCs and a strategic partner. Landon scoffed. Come on. No offense, but that's not even real money. Those deals fall through all the time. Half of those startups crash and burn within a year. Todd nodded. Exactly. It's not the same as a stable career. You know, with structure. Real clients. Benefits. You'll see. It's a bubble. It always is. I didn't respond right away. I just looked at them, then glanced at my mom. Her face was flushed. She looked down at her hands, embarrassed. And that's when she whispered it, barely loud enough for me to hear. You were never supposed to outshine him. I froze. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even bitter. She said it like it was a fact. Like this was the natural order of things, and I had accidentally broken the rules. My chest tightened. All those years of being overlooked, talked down to, sidelined. It wasn't just me imagining things. It had been by design. I stood there, stunned, while Landon poured himself another drink and laughed with his dad. My hands were shaking slightly, not from anger, but from something deeper. A kind of betrayal I didn't even realize I could feel. All I had ever done was stay in my lane. Work hard. Be quiet. And now that I had something to be proud of, it was met with condescension, dismissal, and that whispered confession from the one person I thought had always been in my corner. That's when something shifted in me. A small click, like a lock turning. I slowly pulled out my phone from my pocket, turned the screen toward myself, and opened a folder I had bookmarked for this exact moment. My voice was calm, almost too calm. Then let's really ruin his night. And that's where things started to spiral. I didn't know exactly what I meant when I said it. Then let's really ruin his night. The words just came out, quiet, pointed, deliberate, but even I wasn't sure what I was about to do. I wasn't angry in the traditional sense. Not red-faced, loud, and boiling. No, this was colder. Like someone had flipped a switch inside me, and the years of quiet tolerance had finally run out of rope. The funny thing is, nobody seemed to hear me except my mom, who gave me a confused glance but didn't say anything. I pocketed my phone and plastered on a smile like nothing had happened. The rest of dinner moved in slow motion. The long mahogany table was set like something out of a magazine. Turkey perfectly golden, potatoes fluffed and whipped, cranberry sauce sliced into identical discs. Todd sat at the head of the table, carving the turkey like a smug Roman emperor. Aunt Melissa complimented everything with a practiced tone, always loud enough for guests to hear how grateful she was. And Landon? He was in full performance mode, holding court like usual. He had some story about negotiating a deal at his firm, something about leveraging synergy and upstream visibility. I tuned it out. I'd heard it all before, just different buzzwords each year. At one point, Landon raised his glass and said, "Here's to family, and to learning from those of us who know how to succeed." There was a light chuckle around the table, the kind that wasn't really laughter, just a social reflex. I noticed my mom look away, fiddling with her napkin. I reached for my water, but my hand was trembling. It wasn't the toast that got me. It was the smirk on Landon's face right after, the slight tilt of the head, like he was daring me to respond. So I did. I actually had a funny call last week, I said casually. One of our investors is pushing us to expand into enterprise partnerships. They brought up licensing our back-end architecture to 3 major fintechs in Q1. Pretty wild. The table went quiet. Not because anyone really understood what I was saying, but because I had the audacity to speak with authority in a space Landon considered his territory. Landon leaned forward, lips twitching. "That's cute," he said. "But that's not the same as a real acquisition. We're talking about valuation, not actual revenue. Your company might be worth $25 million on paper, but that's not money in your pocket. It's speculative. You could lose it all tomorrow." I nodded slowly. "That's true. But we have 8-figure term sheets on the table, and I still own majority equity. So yeah, not exactly sweating." My uncle coughed into his hand. "Let's not turn this into a pissing contest, all right? We're here to enjoy a meal." That would have been fine if it had ended there. But it didn't. Aunt Melissa chimed in, her voice thick with syrup. "It's just so refreshing to see Landon's stability, though. He's always been grounded. He didn't run off chasing some app dream or Silicon Valley pipe fantasy. He stayed close to family, built something real." I blinked. "Did you just—" She meant it kindly. Todd cut in quickly. "You've done well for yourself, Alex. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Startups crash every day." "Yeah," Landon added. "And if they don't crash, they get bought and gutted. Either way, it's not sustainable. You're lucky you even got that far. It's not really repeatable." I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. I didn't know how to explain that this wasn't luck, that I'd built something from the ground up, that I'd pulled all-nighters for years, eating canned soup and debugging code until my eyes burned, that I'd taken risks and made decisions that no one else in that room would ever have the guts to make. But I could see it on their faces. They didn't care. And that's when the real betrayal happened. Dessert had just been brought out, some pristine pecan pie that looked like it came from a bakery with a 3-month wait list, when Todd cleared his throat and clinked his glass with a fork. "I have an announcement," he said, standing. "Melissa and I have been thinking a lot about legacy lately, about how to pass on not just wealth, but wisdom to the next generation. So we've decided to bring Landon into the company as a full partner. Effective January." There was polite applause. Cheers. Smiles. Even my mom clapped, albeit weakly. But Todd wasn't done. "We're also restructuring some assets and shifting parts of the firm under his name. That includes the rental properties in Phoenix, the consulting arm, and the Lake Geneva retreat." Wait, what? The Lake Geneva retreat wasn't just some vacation spot. It was the one place that held good memories for me as a kid. My mom and I used to go there when Todd let us borrow it during off-seasons. It was a modest A-frame cabin near the water, nothing flashy, but it was ours for a few days each year. We'd play cards, cook together, swim if it was warm enough. It was the only place in the family where I didn't feel like I was borrowing air. "Isn't that a bit much?" I heard myself say. Todd looked at me like I was a fly buzzing near his ear. "Excuse me. The Geneva property. You always said that was for the whole family, that it wasn't part of the business." Landon smirked. "Well, it is now. And I already have plans for it, to be honest. Probably a teardown. Might rebuild it into something modern. Throw some solar panels on it." My mom flinched. I looked at her, hoping, begging, for her to say something. But she didn't. She just sat there, lips pressed tightly together, as if she'd already accepted it. As if she'd known. "You can't be serious," I said, my voice rising. Todd narrowed his eyes. "Alex, don't make a scene. This is a business decision. You wouldn't understand." "You mean I wouldn't be allowed to understand?" "That's enough," he snapped. "You should be grateful you were even invited tonight." That was it. The dam broke. Years of biting my tongue, of swallowing condescension and forced smiles and second-string cousin jokes. All of it came crashing down in that moment. "I built a company from nothing," I said, standing. "From nothing. No handouts. No family firm. No private school network. And you're telling me I wouldn't understand a business decision? You think giving your spoiled son a bundle of assets is wisdom? You're rewarding mediocrity because you're afraid of what real work looks like." "Sit down," Todd growled, "before you embarrass yourself further." "No," I said. "You want to talk legacy? Let's talk legacy. You handed Landon a career. You bought his success. I earned mine." There was a stunned silence. Aunt Melissa reached for her wine. And then my mom, quiet, exhausted, and clearly cornered, said, "Alex, please. Don't." I turned to her. "Why didn't you tell me?" She didn't respond. Just looked down. That hurt more than anything Todd could have said. Landon stood too. And for once, the smirk was gone. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. If you're so rich, then buy your own lake house. No one cares." I felt my chest tighten. "You don't get it, do you? It was never about the property. It was about what it represented. You already had everything, and now you're taking the last piece of anything that ever felt safe. Todd tossed his napkin on the table. You're being dramatic. I pulled out my phone again. Same folder. Same bookmarked file. You want to talk business? Fine. Let's talk business. I've been quiet out of respect, but maybe it's time I share a few details. Like the fact that our biggest investor? He used to be one of your clients. Until you dropped the ball, and he came to me. Todd's eyes widened. And maybe I should tell you what we're planning to launch in January. Because if you think the consulting arm you just gave to Landon is safe from competition, well, let's just say you'll be seeing my name in your inbox soon, along with a few of your clients. My uncle went pale. Landon looked between us, confused. Wait, what is this? I looked him in the eyes. This is what happens when you mistake silence for weakness. The room was dead quiet. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Somewhere, a fork clinked against a plate. And just like that, the power dynamic in the room shifted. I could feel it, a weight lifting off my chest. Not because I had won, not yet, but because I had finally stopped playing their game. But the night wasn't over. Not even close. The fallout from that night was immediate. My mom didn't speak to me on the ride home. Her hands stayed clenched in her lap the whole time, and when I tried to say something, anything, she just gave this tired, empty look that said, "Not now." I didn't press. I watched the streetlights smear against the windshield and listened to the soft clicking of the turn signal as we drove back to her place in silence. When we got inside, she went straight to her room. No hug. No thank you for defending me. No, I'm proud of you. Just the sound of her door shutting softly behind her like the closing credits to a scene I hadn't even realized was over. I stood in her hallway for a long time, phone still in my hand, thinking maybe she'd change her mind and come back out. She didn't. And the next morning, she was gone. Left a note on the counter saying she went to run errands and needed space. No apology. No explanation. Nothing about what she said at dinner or what I'd said back. Just, need time. That one stung more than I wanted to admit. Because here's the thing. When you grow up as the quiet one, the overlooked one, your victories are always half sweet. You get used to winning quietly, to clapping for yourself in empty rooms. And that's fine when you choose that solitude. But when someone you love chooses it for you, when they look at your success and say, "You were never supposed to have that," it carves something open in your chest that doesn't close so easily. Over the next week, the family group chat imploded. At first it was passive-aggressive. Aunt Melissa posted a Bible quote about humility and those who exalt themselves. Uncle Todd dropped a link to an article about startup culture arrogance. And Landon sent me a private message that just said, "Hope it was worth it." I didn't reply. I told myself I was done with all of them, that I had said what needed to be said. But deep down, I was spiraling. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. I kept replaying that moment at the dinner table. My mom's whisper, Todd's smug face, Landon's condescension, the eerie silence after I stood up. It didn't feel like justice. It felt hollow. I even second-guessed myself. Was I too harsh? Was I trying to prove something that didn't need proving? Was I becoming exactly the kind of person they always accused me of being? I stopped checking the group chat. Stopped answering texts from cousins. Even my co-founder, Jared, started to notice. "You good, man?" he asked during a late-night Zoom call. I shrugged. "Fine." He raised an eyebrow. "You look like you haven't slept in a week." Thanksgiving was complicated. He leaned back in his chair. "Family. Yeah, they don't get it. They think all this, what we're building, is fake. That it's some bubble I'm riding." He nodded. "You want to know what my uncle said to me when we got our first funding round?" "What?" "Guess you're lucky some sucker believed in you." I cracked a smile. "Sounds familiar." Jared leaned in. "Let me tell you something. We're not lucky. We're resilient. Lucky people win lotteries. Resilient people grind for 10 years and get called lucky when it finally pays off." That hit harder than I expected. Because for a while, I'd started to forget that. I was so tangled in proving myself to people who never even wanted to understand that I stopped seeing the people who already did. People like Jared. Like our team. Like our customers. Real people who used the thing we built every single day. So, I turned off my phone. I gave myself 2 full days away from the noise, and then I got back to work. And something wild happened. For the first time in months, I started coding again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I locked myself in my apartment with coffee and a whiteboard and rewrote the back end of our core product. Streamlined it, gave it new life. And when I demoed it to the team, their eyes lit up. "This is insane," one of the devs said. "It runs twice as fast." Jared just grinned. Guess Alex got his groove back. And that groove didn't stop. In the weeks that followed, we hit our first major profitability milestone. One of our beta clients turned into a full contract, then referred us to 3 others. The product that Todd and Landon had mocked for being speculative was now bringing in more real revenue than the entire consulting arm of their firm. And the kicker? Our new lead investor. Yeah, the one who dropped Todd's firm a few years back. He offered to host a private networking dinner in Manhattan with several of his VC contacts, and wanted me to speak. That invitation sat in my inbox for a few days. Not because I didn't want it, but because I was still wrestling with that part of me. The kid who used to sit at the Thanksgiving table, hoping for a scrap of recognition. The one who still wondered if success mattered if no one clapped for it. But the truth is, people were clapping now. Just not the ones I'd been performing for. Around that same time, I got a text from my mom. "Can we talk? I've been thinking a lot." I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to protect the peace I had finally started to rebuild. But another part of me still missed her, still wanted her to understand. We met at a diner 2 towns over. Neutral ground. Middle of the afternoon. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, hands wrapped around a coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. I wasn't sure either. We sat in silence for a minute. The waitress came and went. I didn't touch my drink. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. "For what I said. At Thanksgiving." I didn't say anything. She kept going. "I wasn't trying to hurt you. I've spent so many years keeping the peace. Playing nice. Watching Todd and Melissa take up all the space. I thought if I kept my head down, you'd be left alone. I didn't expect you to shine." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I didn't expect it," she said again. "But I should have. That did something to me. It didn't fix everything. Not right away, but it opened a door." "Why didn't you say anything when they gave Landon the lake house?" I asked. She looked down. "Because I already knew it was gone. Todd told me a month earlier. I didn't want to ruin the holiday." "You think pretending everything's fine makes things better?" "No," she whispered. "I think I was scared." We sat there for a while. 2 people who had been surviving for so long we'd forgotten what it felt like to just feel. "Finally," I said, "they don't get to write the story anymore. You know that, right?" She nodded. "You built something from nothing," she said softly. I should have said it sooner. But I see it now. I left the diner with a lighter chest. It wasn't a full reconciliation, not yet, but it was a start. And sometimes, that's enough. Over the next month, things kept moving. We secured another round of funding. We hired new staff. And that Manhattan dinner? I went. I stood in a room full of venture capitalists and CEOs and told the story of how we built our product in a rented garage on the wrong side of town with nothing but laptops and caffeine. I talked about resilience, about failure, about being overlooked. When I finished, someone from the back called out, "So what's next?" And I smiled. "Next," I said, "we show the people who doubted us what real growth looks like." There was a standing ovation. As I flew back home that night, I opened a document I'd been slowly piecing together. It wasn't a business plan. It wasn't an investor pitch. It was a different kind of plan. One that would change everything for Todd. And for Landon. Because while they thought the Lake Geneva retreat was just a cabin, just some aging property to tear down, I had discovered something about it. Something that wasn't in the papers they signed. A loophole. An opportunity. And a chance to deliver the kind of lesson that money can't buy. But that is where the real revenge begins. I didn't start out wanting revenge. After Thanksgiving, I just wanted distance, mental, emotional, physical. I deleted the family group chat. I stopped answering any calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I went ghost. And for a while, it worked. Life was quieter, clearer. But the more I settled into that silence, the more I realized something. It wasn't over. Not for me. Not for the part of me that still heard Landon's smug voice in my sleep, or the way my mom's whisper had sliced through the air like it was always meant to hurt. I had moved on, sure. But they hadn't. I knew their type. They'd rewrite what happened. They'd turn me into the villain of the Thanksgiving table, a bitter outburst from the jealous cousin who couldn't handle success the right way. And that narrative? That would stick. Because they were the ones with the spotlight. With the Christmas cards, and the family reunions, and the group chats I'd been unofficially erased from. So I decided I wasn't just going to move on. I was going to rewrite the narrative. And that started with the cabin. Lake Geneva. It was more than just a symbol. It was my childhood. One of the only places I ever felt safe, and not because of who owned it or how big it was, but because it was quiet, peaceful. Mine and my mom's. We used to call it the reset button. Whenever things got too hard at school or work or home, we'd drive up, bring a stack of books, play board games, and just exist without anyone interrupting. The idea that Landon, of all people, was planning to bulldoze it into some modern abomination lit something inside me I hadn't felt in years. Not rage. Something sharper. Resolve. So I went digging. At first, I just wanted to know when the transfer happened. Who signed what? When? But as I started pulling property records, digging through archived deeds and tax documents, something didn't add up. The property had been transferred to Todd's firm a few years ago, but the land rights were still held in a dormant family trust from the 1980s. My grandfather's name was still listed as the grantor of the land, and the trust hadn't been fully dissolved. That might sound like a technicality, but in legal terms, that's gold. Because while the structure on the land now belonged to the firm, and therefore to Landon, the actual dirt it sat on was still technically under the oversight of the trust. And guess who was named as a secondary beneficiary on that trust? Me. I stared at the scanned document for a long time, not even breathing. It was like watching a ghost from the past rise up with a hand on my shoulder, saying, "You're not done here yet." I immediately called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. Tasha, an old college friend turned real estate attorney who owed me a favor from back when I helped her firm rebuild their client portal after a ransomware scare. "Tasha," I said, "I have something weird, but I think it might be real." She took one look at the documents I emailed and called me back within 10 minutes. "Alex, you're sitting on leverage." I thought so. How strong? Strong enough that if they try to develop, you could legally block construction. What about kicking them off the land? Trickier. You'd need to activate your claim through the trust and prove misuse or abandonment. But it's doable. That was all I needed. Now the question wasn't if I'd act. It was how. I didn't want to walk into court guns blazing. That wasn't my style. And it would only give them ammo to spin the story. Alex is bitter, trying to steal property from Landon after his Thanksgiving tantrum. No, this had to be subtle. Strategic. I had to let them walk into the trap on their own. So I waited. And while I waited, I started gathering intel. The first thing I did was hire a local photographer who lived near the lake. A hobbyist I found through a Geneva neighborhood Facebook group. I told her I was interested in documenting changes to the property for a family archive. She agreed, no questions asked. Over the next 2 weeks, she sent me weekly photos of the cabin. The first batch looked normal, quiet, untouched. The second batch? A dumpster appeared in the driveway. Then scaffolding. Then a sign for a construction firm. Perfect. They were starting renovations. And based on the photos, they hadn't even filed the required notice with the township's historical committee, a group I'd learned had jurisdiction over certain lakeside properties, especially older ones. So I made a few phone calls. One to the local zoning board, another to the historical committee, and then one more to a local reporter who ran a tiny blog that covered Geneva property disputes. Within a week, an official stop work order was posted on the cabin door. But that was just the appetizer. I needed something more theatrical, something poetic. So I went back to the trust. Tasha helped me file a formal motion to reopen and review the trust usage clause, something that hadn't been touched in decades. It triggered an automatic 60-day review period, which legally froze any long-term development or sale of the land. Todd received the letter at his office. And that's when the calls started. First, it was him. Voicemail. Then Aunt Melissa. Then Landon. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I booked a meeting room in downtown Chicago, reserved under a neutral LLC name. I had Tasha join me, along with my firm's legal advisor, just to watch the fireworks. Then I sent one simple email to Todd's office. "You have questions? I have the land. Let's talk." They arrived in suits. Tired eyes. Tension crackling off them like static. Todd tried to take control immediately. "This is absurd, Alex. You're holding up an entire development plan over semantics. We own that property. You own the building," I replied calmly. "Not the soil it's built on." Landon scoffed. This is ridiculous. Tasha leaned forward. What's ridiculous is beginning construction without proper title clarity or zoning board approval. You've made several procedural errors, which my client is under no obligation to overlook. Todd's face was red. What do you want? I didn't answer right away. I looked at them. 3 people who had belittled me for years. Who had taken and taken, assuming I'd never fight back. Who thought I'd disappear into the footnotes of their success stories. And then I said, I want you to realize you never owned me. Todd blinked. What? This isn't about the cabin. It's not even about the land. It's about every table I wasn't welcome at. Every time you try to shrink me so your son could feel bigger. Every whispered joke. Every backhanded compliment. I stopped chasing your approval a long time ago. But now you need mine. The silence in the room was heavy. So you're doing this out of spite? Melissa asked. No, I said. I'm doing this because I finally can. And then I slid the folder across the table. Inside were 2 options. Option 1. I retain partial control of the land through the trust and allow seasonal access with written permission. No construction. No sale. No teardown. The cabin stays intact. A line drawn in the sand. Option 2. I buy out the firm's stake in the cabin entirely. Full ownership reverts to me. The land, the structure, everything. Market value plus 15%. Cash. They looked at each other. They didn't like either option. But they understood the implication. They no longer held the pen. I did. They left without signing. I knew they'd drag it out. Try to counter. But the clock was ticking, and the law was on my side. And in the meantime, I had something even better in motion. Because the Manhattan investor dinner had led to a second dinner. And a third. And then a casual lunch with a former executive from one of Todd's top consulting clients. He didn't like Todd. Said he always found him arrogant. I smiled. Because I knew exactly what I was going to do with that. But that's the next chapter. I waited 2 weeks after that meeting. Just long enough for the silence to become unbearable. Landon sent me a 1-line email asking if I was done being dramatic. I didn't respond. Todd called my mom twice, hoping she could talk some sense into me. But she didn't pick up. She'd stopped defending him after the diner. After years of biting her tongue, she had finally started to see what I had lived with all my life. But the revenge itself? It wasn't about theatrics. It wasn't about one big speech or grandstanding in a courtroom. That's not how power works. True power is quieter, strategic, patient. It happens in rooms your enemies never get invited to, until it's too late. And I was in those rooms now. It started with a simple lunch in Manhattan. The former executive, Matt, was in his 50s, sharp, and surprisingly honest for someone who used to be CFO of a company worth $500 million. He'd left that role a year ago after a merger and was now doing advisory work and angel investing. You said you used to work with Todd's firm? I asked over coffee. He smirked. Briefly. Overpriced and underwhelming. They coast on old contracts and family name. I told my CEO at the time it was a waste of budget. That was all the confirmation I needed. I'm building a new arm inside our company, I said. Enterprise consulting, SaaS implementation, AI migration, pipeline analysis, high-level advisory. We need a flagship client. He raised an eyebrow. You offering me a job? Offering you equity, I said, sliding a term sheet across the table. If you can bring in your old contacts and help close one of Todd's top 3 clients, I'll match your old stock payout and give you full C-suite title in the new division. He glanced at the numbers and gave a low whistle. You're serious. Deadly. He chuckled, then extended a hand. Let's bury them. Within a month, Matt had done exactly what I hoped he would. He got in touch with a mid-sized financial services firm that Todd's consultancy had handled for years. A juicy contract worth around $800,000 annually, mostly for compliance support and implementation. Todd's team had been coasting for years. Copy-paste solutions, no customization, no evolution. The client was dissatisfied but too lazy to move. Until Matt reminded them what innovation looked like. I didn't even need to pitch. Matt did the talking. I just sat in the room, nodded where necessary, and let the product speak for itself. The client signed a 3-year deal with us. $1.5 million guaranteed, with performance bonuses stacked on top. That same day, Todd's firm got the termination letter. But I wasn't done. Remember the Lake Geneva cabin? The one they tried to gut and rebuild into a soulless McMansion? They kept dragging their feet, trying to stall the land review, hoping I'd back down. So I hit them from another angle. See, I had quietly contacted the Lake Geneva Historical Preservation Committee a few weeks earlier. Turns out, the cabin, my grandfather's cabin, was eligible for historical landmark status. It had original timber from the 1940s, a preserved layout, and even handwritten notes from my grandfather's architectural sketchpad nailed into the crawlspace, still intact. Tasha and I filed the preservation request. We added photos, family letters, receipts, even a photo of me and my mom from 1998, sitting on the porch, eating grilled cheese and reading books. The board reviewed it, approved it, and just like that, the cabin was untouchable. No renovations, no bulldozers, no future sale without state-level oversight. Landon's modern teardown plans? Vaporized. They received the notification via certified mail. Todd apparently called the committee to protest. They told him it was out of their hands. It all came to a head at another family dinner. Not Thanksgiving this time, Easter. Smaller crowd. Just a few cousins, a ham on the table, and a very awkward atmosphere. Todd wasn't talking. Landon showed up late, already fuming. I knew why. Word had finally gotten back to them that I'd poached 2 more of their long-term clients. That our new consulting division had overtaken theirs in quarterly earnings. That I was now considered a preferred vendor for a dozen of the clients they used to own. He pulled me aside before dessert. "You think this proves something?" he hissed. I didn't answer. "You think you're better than me now? You stole from us." "I didn't steal," I said calmly. "I competed, and I won." He stepped closer. "You're still a joke. You always were." I smiled, slow and easy. "Then why do you keep losing to me?" He opened his mouth, closed it, walked away without another word. Todd left shortly after. No goodbye, just the sound of the door closing harder than necessary. In the weeks that followed, things unraveled fast. Todd's firm lost another contract. This one was with a startup in the Midwest that Jared personally handled. Our tools ran better. Our support team responded faster. And unlike Todd's firm, we didn't treat young clients like they were disposable. I heard through the grapevine that they laid off 6 people. Landon wasn't one of them, but his role was quietly adjusted. No longer a partner. Now, just senior consultant. Meanwhile, the Lake Geneva cabin? I took full control of it after they agreed, begrudgingly, to sell their interest back to the trust. I paid the market rate. No tricks. Just numbers. Fair and final. The day the papers were signed, I drove up with my mom. She hadn't been there in almost a decade. We sat on the porch with 2 mugs of tea and watched the sun go down. The lake shimmered gold. The air smelled like pine and old memories. "They really thought you'd just roll over," she said quietly. "They always did," I replied. She looked at me. "You didn't just prove them wrong. You did it without turning into them." That was the part one was proudest of. Because I never stooped. I never slandered. I never yelled or schemed or begged. I just used what I had, my mind, my work, my integrity, and let that speak for itself. And when it finally spoke, it roared. About a month later, I got a final email from Landon. "You got what you wanted. Enjoy the cabin. You'll always be a parasite." I didn't reply. Didn't need to. Because a week later, I posted a photo to my social media. It was the front porch of the cabin. My laptop on the table. A coffee mug beside it. The caption read, "Built something real. No handouts. No apologies. Just peace." The post went viral in my little circle. Not because it was flashy, but because it was honest. And if Todd or Landon saw it, good. They deserved to know what peace looked like after everything they tried to take. And now, I don't think about them much. The cabin's quiet again. My company's growing. And my mom and I are closer than ever. She comes up once a month, brings pie, reads on the porch, and reminds me that we made it. Not because someone handed us power, but because we earned it. Every inch, every scar, every silence. They tried to write me out of the story, so I wrote my own ending. And this time, they don't get a single page.